The shadows of slavery unveiling the enduring legacy of black oppression. They still speak in the rustle of the cotton fields, in the sighs of the riverbanks where sorrow yields, in the hum of the wind through ancient trees. Their voices carry on the breeze. They still speak through the soil beneath our feet, whispering tales of endurance, bittersweet, from the chains and the whips, the relentless toil, to the dreams and hopes that refused to spoil. They still speak in the rhythm of the blues, in jazz notes, gospel choirs, and soul hues, in the beat of drums and the strum of strings, their spirit in every song that freedom sings. They still speak through the art that adorns, through poems and prose, the pain that warns, in the stroke of a brush, in the pen's ink, their legacy, stronger than we think. They still speak in the struggles of today, in every march, every protest, every display, of courage and defiance, unbowed, unbent, their cries for justice, a resounding lament. They still speak in the laughter of children free, in the dreams they dare, in the lives they see, in the progress made, though the journey is long, their whispers weave through the nation's song. They still speak in the faces of the bold, in stories retold in hands that hold the weight of history, the fight for right, their voice as a beacon in the darkest night. They still speak, in strength, in pain, in love, a legacy beneath and above, in the hearts of those who remember and seek the truth and honor of the lives that still speak. Introduction. In the annals of human history, few institutions have cast as long and dark a shadow as slavery. Its legacy, intertwined with the sinews of societies around the world, continues to influence the lives of millions. This book, The Shadows of Slavery, unveiling the enduring legacy of black oppression, seeks to peel back the layers of time to expose the ongoing ramifications of this brutal system, which has indelibly marked the social, economic, and political landscapes of the modern era. The weight of history. Slavery, particularly the transatlantic slave trade, represents a profound and tragic chapter in human history. From the 16th to the 19th centuries, millions of Africans were forcibly uprooted from their homeland, subjected to unimaginable horrors, and sold into bondage across the Americas. This forced migration and enslavement were driven by economic greed, racial prejudice, and a dehumanizing ideology that regarded black people as mere property. The story of slavery is not just a tale of the past but a living legacy. The systems and structures established during those centuries of oppression have evolved but not disappeared. Racism, economic disparity, and social injustice remain entrenched, perpetuating the cycle of oppression in various forms. A narrative of pain and resilience. To truly understand the enduring legacy of slavery, we must listen to the voices of those who endured it. Their narratives, often recorded in slave accounts, letters, and oral histories, provide a window into the brutal realities of life under enslavement. Take, for instance, the story of Olaudah Equiano, an African man who was kidnapped as a child and sold into slavery. His autobiography offers a searing account of the cruelty he faced and his relentless pursuit of freedom. Equiano's story is one among many that reveal the human spirit's resilience in the face of profound suffering. Another poignant narrative is that of Harriet Jacobs, whose Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl recounts her harrowing experiences as an enslaved woman. Jacobs' tale of sexual exploitation, constant fear, and eventual escape underscores the gendered dimensions of slavery and the unique struggles faced by enslaved women. The brutal truth: slavery's brutality is not confined to physical torment but extends to psychological and emotional scars. Families were torn apart, with parents and children sold to different owners, never to see each other again. The dehumanization was systematic and deliberate, aiming to strip enslaved people of their identities and humanity. The abolition of slavery did not mark the end of black oppression. Instead, it transitioned into new forms: sharecropping, Jim Crow laws, and institutionalized racism. The supposed freedom granted by emancipation was hollow, as former slaves and their descendants continued to face systemic barriers designed to keep them in subjugation. A legacy of resistance and struggle. Despite the relentless oppression, black people have continually resisted and fought for their rights. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s, led by figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X, represents a pinnacle of this ongoing struggle. Their efforts, characterized by both peaceful protests and more radical actions, were instrumental in dismantling legal segregation and advancing racial equality. Yet, the struggle is far from over. Contemporary movements like Black Lives Matter highlight the persistent racial injustices and violence faced by Black communities. The deaths of individuals such as Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and George Floyd have sparked global protests and renewed calls for systemic change. Empathy and connection. Writing about slavery and its legacy requires an empathetic approach that honors the experiences of those who suffered and those who continue to suffer due to its lingering effects. It is crucial to evoke the emotional depth of these stories, connecting readers to the pain and resilience of individuals who lived through these horrors. Consider the story of Solomon Northup, a free Black man kidnapped and sold into slavery. His memoir, 12 Years a Slave, vividly depicts the dehumanizing conditions he endured and his eventual return to freedom. Northup's narrative, like many others, serves as a powerful reminder of the enduring human spirit and the relentless pursuit of dignity and justice. Analytical insights. Understanding the legacy of slavery also requires a critical examination of the systems and ideologies that perpetuate racism. Slavery was not an isolated institution but part of a broader framework of economic exploitation and racial hierarchy. Today, these systems manifest in various ways, from mass incarceration to economic inequality and educational disparities. This book aims to challenge readers to confront these uncomfortable truths and consider their role in dismantling these systems of oppression. It calls for a deeper awareness of how history shapes the present and an active engagement in creating a more just and equitable future. Engaging with the past to shape the future. The Shadows of Slavery is not just a recounting of historical events but a call to action. By engaging with the past, we can better understand the present and work towards a future where the legacy of slavery no longer casts its shadow over society. This journey through history, personal narratives, and critical analysis is intended to be both informative and transformative, inspiring readers to join the ongoing struggle for racial justice and equality. In the chapters that follow, we will delve deeper into the origins of slavery, its impact on societies across the globe, and the enduring fight against its legacy. We will explore the stories of those who lived through it, the movements that have risen to challenge it, and the pathways toward a future free from the shadows of oppression. Chapter 1. Origins of the Transatlantic Slave Trade. The dawn of a dark era. The transatlantic slave trade, a profound and tragic epoch in human history, began in the 15th century and spanned over 400 years. It was driven by European colonial powers seeking to exploit the abundant resources of the New World. Portugal, the forerunner in this enterprise, established trading posts along the West African coast in the mid-1400s, setting the stage for a commerce in human lives that would reach unparalleled brutality. Economic motives and European expansion. European nations, embroiled in fierce competition for global dominance, saw the New World as a treasure trove of raw materials and economic opportunity. Sugar, tobacco, cotton, and other lucrative crops required vast amounts of labor to cultivate. Initially, Europeans attempted to enslave indigenous peoples, but they succumbed to diseases brought by the colonizers and resisted fiercely. Thus, Europeans turned their gaze toward Africa. Africa was not an untamed wilderness waiting to be exploited. It was a continent of diverse and sophisticated societies. The Europeans found allies in some African leaders willing to trade captives from rival groups for European goods, including firearms, which exacerbated regional conflicts. This collaboration and coercion led to the systematic capture and transportation of Africans across the Atlantic. The Middle Passage. A journey of horrors. The journey from Africa to the Americas, known as the Middle Passage, was a harrowing ordeal. Captives were crammed into the holds of slave ships, chained and shackled, enduring inhumane conditions for months. Olaudah Equiano, a former slave who chronicled his experiences, described the voyage in his autobiography. Greater than the shrieks of the women, and the groans of the dying, rendered the whole a scene of horror almost inconceivable. The closeness of the place, and the heat of the climate, added to the number in the ship, which was so crowded that each had scarcely room to turn himself, almost suffocated us. Mortality rates during the Middle Passage were staggering, with estimates suggesting that up to 20% of captives perished due to disease, malnutrition, and abuse. Those who survived faced a life of unimaginable hardship and brutal exploitation in the Americas. The economic engine of slavery. The transatlantic slave trade became the backbone of the burgeoning capitalist economies in Europe and the Americas. Plantations in the Caribbean, Brazil, and the southern United States thrived on the forced labor of enslaved Africans. The profits from sugar, cotton, and tobacco flowed back to Europe, fueling the Industrial Revolution, and cementing the economic foundations of modern Western societies. The wealth generated by slavery was not limited to the plantation owners. It permeated European economies, benefiting shipbuilders, bankers, insurers, and merchants. The infrastructure of Western capitalism was, in many ways, built on the backs of enslaved Africans. The human cost of the transatlantic slave trade is incalculable. Families were torn apart, cultural identities were erased, and entire societies were destabilized. Enslaved individuals were stripped of their names, languages, and histories, reduced to mere commodities in a brutal economic system. The narratives of enslaved people reveal the profound suffering and resilience of those who endured this oppression. Harriet Jacobs, in her autobiography, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, vividly described the constant fear and exploitation she faced. Greater than, "My master had power and law on his side. I had a determined will. There is might in each." The resistance despite the overwhelming odds, enslaved Africans resisted their bondage in myriad ways. From subtle acts of defiance to full-scale rebellions, they fought to preserve their humanity and regain their freedom. The story of Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution stands as a powerful testament to the indomitable spirit of resistance. The enslaved population of Haiti overthrew their oppressors, establishing the first free black republic in 1804. Analyzing the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade is evident in the persistent racial inequalities and systemic racism that plague modern societies. The economic and social structures established during slavery have evolved but continue to disadvantage black communities globally. The wealth gap, educational disparities, and mass incarceration in the United States are direct descendants of the ideologies and practices of the slave trade. Understanding this legacy requires a critical examination of the systems and ideologies that perpetuate racism. It is not enough to acknowledge the horrors of the past, we must also confront the ongoing consequences of those horrors. This chapter, and indeed this book, seeks to shed light on these truths and challenge readers to think critically about their role in addressing and dismantling systemic racism. Conclusion: The origins of the transatlantic slave trade reveal a complex interplay of economic ambition, racial prejudice, and human suffering. It was a system meticulously designed to exploit and dehumanize millions of Africans for profit. The repercussions of this dark chapter in history continue to echo through time, shaping the present and challenging us to build a more just and equitable future. As we journey through the subsequent chapters, we will delve deeper into the experiences of those who lived through these times, examining the enduring impact of slavery and the ongoing struggle for justice and equality. The shadows of slavery may be long, but through understanding and action, we can begin to dissipate their hold on our world. Chapter 2. African Societies and Kingdoms Before Slavery: A Rich Tapestry of Civilizations. Before the advent of the transatlantic slave trade, Africa was a continent of immense diversity, home to sophisticated societies and powerful kingdoms. These civilizations boasted rich cultures, advanced political systems, and thriving economies. Understanding the complexity and achievements of these pre-slavery African societies is crucial to dispelling the erroneous narratives that have historically portrayed Africa as primitive and uncivilized. Kingdom of Mali. A beacon of wealth and learning, one of the most renowned African empires was the Kingdom of Mali, which flourished from the 13th to the 16th centuries. Under the rule of Mansa Musa, Mali reached its zenith. Mansa Musa, often cited as one of the wealthiest individuals in history, embarked on a legendary pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, demonstrating the empire's immense wealth and the sophistication of its culture. Mali was a center of learning and trade. The city of Timbuktu housed the famous Sankore University and numerous libraries, attracting scholars from across the Islamic world. The trade routes crisscrossing the Sahara connected Mali to Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, facilitating the exchange of gold, salt, and intellectual ideas. The Kingdom of Benin. Artistic excellence and urbanization. Further south, the Kingdom of Benin, located in present-day Nigeria, was another testament to pre-colonial African sophistication. The Benin Kingdom was known for its impressive urban planning and artistic achievements. The Benin bronzes, intricate sculptures made from brass and bronze, are celebrated worldwide for their craftsmanship and historical significance. Benin City, the kingdom's capital, was a marvel of engineering with its expansive walls and moats, comparable to those of medieval European cities. The Oba, or king, of Benin, ruled over a highly organized society with a complex bureaucracy and thriving trade networks extending to Europe and beyond. Great Zimbabwe. Architectural marvel in southeastern Africa, the Kingdom of Great Zimbabwe, which existed from the 11th to the 15th century, was renowned for its architectural prowess. The Great Zimbabwe ruins, with their massive stone walls constructed without mortar, stand as a testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of its people. This civilization was a major trading hub, dealing in gold and ivory with merchants from as far away as China and Persia. The grandeur of Great Zimbabwe challenges the stereotypes that have long overshadowed African history. It underscores the fact that African societies were capable of producing architectural feats and engaging in sophisticated economic and cultural exchanges. The Kingdom of Congo. A complex and organized society, the Kingdom of Congo, located in Central Africa, was another significant pre-colonial state. Established in the late 14th century, Congo was characterized by its highly centralized administration and complex social structures. The kingdom engaged in extensive trade with Portuguese explorers, exchanging goods such as ivory, copper, and textiles. Congo's political and social systems were sophisticated, with a king, the Mani Congo, ruling over a hierarchy of nobles and local chiefs. The kingdom's interactions with Europeans were initially based on mutual benefit, but this relationship eventually deteriorated into exploitation and conflict, particularly with the advent of the slave trade. Dispelling myths and recognizing achievements, the histories of these and other African societies before the transatlantic slave trade reveal a continent of innovation, culture, and complexity. These civilizations had established economic systems, political institutions, and cultural practices that were comparable to those in other parts of the world. It is crucial to dispel the myths and biases that have long portrayed Africa as a continent of darkness awaiting European enlightenment. These narratives were constructed to justify the dehumanization and exploitation of African peoples. Recognizing the achievements of pre-slavery African societies challenges these misconceptions and honors the rich heritage that was disrupted by the advent of the transatlantic slave trade. The impact of the slave trade on African societies. The transatlantic slave trade had a devastating impact on these thriving societies. The capture and forced removal of millions of Africans not only depopulated vast regions but also disrupted social structures, economies, and political systems. Kingdoms like Benin and Congo, which had initially engaged with Europeans as equals, found themselves ensnared in a web of violence and exploitation. The slave trade fueled internal conflicts as different groups vied for control and collaborated with European traders. This period saw the rise of predatory states and the proliferation of violence, fundamentally altering the continent's trajectory. The loss of so many individuals had a profound impact on African societies, creating a legacy of trauma and dislocation. A legacy of strength and resilience. Despite the immense challenges posed by the slave trade, African societies demonstrated remarkable resilience. The cultural, intellectual, and social foundations laid before the era of slavery continued to influence and inspire African communities. Traditional knowledge, artistic expressions, and social structures endured, providing a basis for resistance and recovery. Enslaved Africans carried with them the rich cultural heritage of their homelands, shaping the cultural landscapes of the Americas and beyond. From spiritual practices to music, art, and cuisine, the contributions of African peoples have left an indelible mark on global cultures. Conclusion: the history of African societies and kingdoms before slavery is a testament to the continent's rich and diverse heritage. These civilizations were marked by their achievements in trade, politics, art, and architecture. Recognizing this history is essential to understanding the full impact of the transatlantic slave trade and honoring the legacy of strength and resilience that continues to inspire. As we continue to explore the enduring legacy of Black oppression, it is vital to remember and celebrate the accomplishments of African societies. By doing so, we acknowledge the profound loss caused by the slave trade and the enduring strength of African peoples. This chapter serves as a reminder that Africa's history did not begin with slavery, but with a tapestry of civilizations that contributed significantly to human progress. Chapter 3. The Middle Passage. The journey into darkness. The Middle Passage stands as one of the most harrowing chapters in human history. It was the forced transatlantic voyage that enslaved Africans endured, a pivotal leg of the triangular trade route that connected Europe, Africa, and the Americas. This journey was characterized by unimaginable suffering, marking the beginning of an existence defined by brutal oppression for millions of Africans. To grasp the gravity of the Middle Passage is to confront the depths of human cruelty and the profound impact of this historical atrocity. The mechanics of the trade. The process began in the coastal forts of West Africa, where captives were held before being loaded onto ships. These forts, like Elmina Castle in modern-day Ghana, were sites of immense suffering and dehumanization. Enslaved people were branded, stripped of their identities, and reduced to mere cargo. Slave ships, such as the notorious Brooks, were designed for maximum capacity with little regard for human comfort or survival. Diagrams of these ships reveal the extent of this dehumanization. Hundreds of men, women, and children packed into cramped, filthy spaces. Each individual was allotted an area no larger than a coffin, barely able to move or breathe. The ships, reeking of sweat, excrement, and disease, were floating dungeons on an unforgiving sea. The horror of the voyage. The conditions aboard these vessels were brutal. Over the weeks and months of the journey, enslaved Africans faced starvation, disease, and violence. Olada Ekwano, in his autobiography, recounted the terror and despair he experienced. Greater than, the stench of the hold while we were on the coast was so intolerably loathsome, that it was dangerous to remain there for any time, and some of us had been permitted to stay on the deck for the fresh air. But now that the whole ship's cargo were confined together, it became absolutely pestilential. Disease spread rapidly in the confined, unsanitary conditions, with dysentery, smallpox, and measles claiming many lives. Those who fell ill or died were often thrown overboard, viewed as expendable losses in the pursuit of profit. It is estimated that between 10% and 20% of captives perished during the Middle Passage, a testament to the inhumanity of this voyage. Personal accounts of suffering. The personal accounts of those who survived the Middle Passage provide a window into the unimaginable suffering endured by the enslaved. One such account is that of Venture Smith, who was captured as a child and survived the horrific journey across the Atlantic. He later recounted, "Greater than, we were all put under deck, so that we could not see how they managed the ship. We were confined in the hold for a long time, where we suffered much misery from the lack of water, from bad provisions, and from want of fresh air. Many of us died of the putrid fever and other disorders." These narratives reveal not only the physical torment but also the psychological trauma inflicted upon the enslaved. The journey stripped them of their freedom, their homes, and often their sense of humanity. The role of the crew members aboard slave ships were both perpetrators and sufferers of this grim trade. While they enforced the inhumane conditions, they too faced dangers. Rebellions and insurrections by enslaved Africans were common, as they resisted their captors in desperate bids for freedom. These rebellions were met with brutal suppression, further exacerbating the violence and suffering aboard. John Newton, a former slave ship captain who later became an abolitionist, described the moral degradation and brutal discipline he witnessed and enacted. Greater than, "I once was an active instrument in a business at which my heart now shudders." His transformation from a participant in the trade to a vocal opponent highlights the deep moral conflicts and eventual recognition of the trade's inhumanity by some of its enforcers. The psychological toll. The psychological impact of the Middle Passage cannot be overstated. Enslaved Africans were subjected to a systematic process of dehumanization intended to break their spirit and erase their identities. The trauma of this experience left lasting scars on individuals and communities, shaping the collective memory and resilience of the African diaspora. Survivors like Mary Prince, who documented her life in The History of Mary Prince, described the enduring psychological torment of her enslavement. Greater than, "I had often, in my illness, longed for death. But now I began to think if I was to die, I should go to my dear mother and sisters in heaven, and have rest. I thought that slavery was too hard to bear." Legacy and reflection. The legacy of the Middle Passage extends far beyond the physical journey. It represents the starting point of systemic oppression and exploitation that continued through slavery, segregation, and into the present day. The historical trauma of the Middle Passage has left an indelible mark on the descendants of those who survived, influencing cultural identities, social structures, and ongoing struggles for justice and equality. Understanding the Middle Passage is crucial for recognizing the profound injustices that have shaped the modern world. It challenges us to confront the brutal truths of history and consider our role in addressing the lingering effects of this legacy. By acknowledging the horrors of the past, We honor the resilience of those who endured and survived, and commit to building a future free from oppression. Conclusion: the Middle Passage was not just a journey across the Atlantic, it was a passage into a life of unimaginable suffering and oppression. The stories of those who endured this journey, their strength and resilience, serve as powerful reminders of the human capacity for endurance and resistance. As we continue to explore the shadows of slavery, it is imperative to remember these narratives and the profound impact of the Middle Passage on the history and legacy of Black oppression. Through understanding and reflection, we can begin to dismantle the structures of racism and inequality that persist today, honoring the memory of those who suffered and striving for a more just and equitable world.